Good morning. Welcome to the interview series of the Professor's World Peace Academy. I am Frank Kaufmann, the director of the PWPA, Professor's World Peace Academy, and we're very fortunate to have with us this morning for this series in which we converse with scholars from around the world, Professor Dr. Drissa Kone. Dr. Kone is currently an assistant professor of conflict studies at the Unification Theological Seminary. He obtained a Bachelor of Arts degree in education in the Ivory Coast in 2007. He worked briefly in the Ivory Coast as a teacher before moving to the United States later that year. Dr. Kone went on to earn his Master's of Divinity, focusing on spiritual counseling at the Unification Theological Seminary in 2012, and a Master's in Conflict Management and Negotiation at Norwich University in 2014. In May of 2016, Dr. Kone obtained his doctoral degree in Practical Theology in Peace and Justice at UTS, focusing on transformational leadership and the effective management of cross-cultural conflict between communities. There's been a recent development in Dr. Kone's professional career, but I'm not going to read that off now. Rather, we'll wait till he comes on and let Dr. Kone himself break the news. The subjects of his studies: transformational leadership, cross-cultural conflict between communities. These are the topic of his recent book, which we will introduce, and the topic of the conversation we will have. So please join me to welcome Dr. Drissa Kone. Wonderful. Thank you. This is great. Very happy to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Good. All right. So as I introduced you, I spoke a little bit about your educational history, the various degrees you've acquired here and there, both in Africa and here in the U.S.
Right.
And I spoke also about a couple of your various appointments and responsibilities and professional positions you've held. But I deliberately left one out because it's pretty fresh and new, and I decided maybe you yourself could tell us what has been going on in your life.
That's right.
And so tell us about your most recent appointment.
All right. So I've been a fan of UTS for more than 10 years now.
Yes.
So when I moved in this country, it was 2008. I actually decided to go to UTS. So I started my graduate program, MRE first, and then I changed it to an MA program, and then finally to an MD program because I was more interested in the practical aspect of ministry.
Yes.
And when I got my MD, so I actually became one of the recruiter at UTS for about a year, and after my second degree, I came back to do the doctoral program. So it's a long story, love for UTS, love for education, but in that specific area and component, spirituality.
Yes.
So I think this is probably one of the reasons why I was appointed to this to be the doctor, the director of the doctoral ministry program, because I went through the program myself, and that's something major. And also, I think the president wanted to actually project a younger face into the program so that we can inspire more young people to pursue a doctoral degree program, because it can be intimidated, for sure.
Yes.
To want to take that kind of challenge.
That's right.
Yeah, I want to be a glue, I guess, for
Wonderful.
many young people, because things that we're facing in society today, we need like an authentic voice
Yes.
to address those issues.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I merely wanted to reserve this special moment to participate in the announcement of your appointment. It's very recent that there was a public announcement of your appointment to be the director of the doctoral program there
Correct.
at UTS. So I think they've made a tremendously smart decision,
Mm.
and I think there's a lot of wisdom in having someone that's been through it, and also your sensitivity to the kind of being a little scary and to help young people over that step to
Right.
want to. That's great stuff. Okay, that's great stuff. But the main reason why we're here today is to discuss your recent publication entitled "The Path to Peace: Path to Peace, Transforming Pain into Love." So that's available on Amazon, and listeners will be able to find that link in the article about our interview.
Hmm.
All right?
Yes.
Very good. So as you know, I've read this book a couple of times, few times, and have endeavored to be part of the commentary for the promotion of this book. So I enjoy it, and I'm very happy
Thank
that
you.
we can have you here to explain more deeply this all important matter. The other thing I'll say before starting in
Mhm.
is when we hear your story, which we'll launch into in a minute,
Mhm.
it's so poignant and so relevant and so needed right at this very moment in American history and what has rapidly erupted into world history. The issue of race relations, the issue of bearing unjust practices against myself and ways forward beyond that are really what are the main thing everybody's facing now, both politically and socially and culturally. And so, how interesting it is that you have written on this very subject. In a way, you should be on every talk show right now because, I mean, our country
Mhm.
is burning down. People are trying to find the right way to
Yeah,
deal with the absolute reality of injustice.
that's
And
right.
so, this is a great opportunity we have here this morning.
Yeah.
In the preface, which often is used to be the nugget or the nut or the synopsis or the main point of what's developed in depth throughout the book, you
Yeah.
write, addressing conflict at its roots
Hmm.
through a self-transformative approach
Yeah.
could be effective in making the world a better place.
Hmm.
There is no unity in resentment, no forgiveness in revenge.
Hmm.
A collective responsibility is required to engrave in human consciousness the greatest values of forgiveness, unity, and peace. So, in this brief couple of words,
Hmm.
you've introduced a great many discrete concepts,
Yeah.
and let me identify them and invite you to launch in whatever way you want, either on this particular reading, what I've just read,
Hmm.
or about the book itself, the process itself, etc.
Yeah.
I'll definitely be asking about the biographical realities and the spiritual experiences that underlay your capacity to arrive at these insights, not only
Yeah.
your very careful scholarly research throughout, but also the roots of your insights and inspiration. But
Yeah.
here as I read, um, addressing conflict at its roots
Hmm.
through a self-transformative approach. So the options on dealing with conflict are very often in the realms of political science, in the realms of economic structures, in macro, large, kind of secular scientific analyses of elements that generate conflict. But you are jumping way down to, not down to, but way to self-transformative. Just my own very self is what immediately jumps out at me, and then you jump right back out to making the world a better place. So it's about the self, yet it's about the world. Again, right away, you jump right back out to a collective responsibility
Mm-hmm.
is required to engrave in human consciousness these essential qualities: forgiveness, unity, and peace.
Mm-hmm.
So if you start as you like, but if you can, this in and out, this way out, way in, this self and collective, the perennial roots, making the world a better place, yet we're dealing with self transformation. If you can, you speak to these, the stretch in the spectrum in your very initial introductory thoughts.
Yeah. Thank you. I think this is basically the main thesis of my book at large. So that actually, peace will start with human beings, in the heart of human beings. We know whenever problems arise in society, people tend to come out and negotiate peace with some kind of interest-based or changing policies and law, which are great things to do. But based on my own personal experience, and also by looking at some of the people who made a tremendous shift in history in the area of peace and reconciliation, I strongly believe that peace will start within each individual. So the direction is not out there first and then coming to me, but it is from me coming out there. So that's the picture. So
Yes.
the picture is to shift things around, not to actually think that it's going to be solved solely from out there. But I have to do, it's about me going back within myself and looking at some of those struggles. Because whenever there is a challenge in society, politically or as an individual actually making decisions or maybe encouraging a group of people to make a decision. So the individual is basically the root, the basis for change.
Yes.
And one thing that I actually, when we talk a lot about forgiveness, and sometimes we think that it's the other person who's in fault, who need to forgive, who needs to actually ask for forgiveness. But forgiveness always both ways, and it's a healthy process to heal emotional pain. It's not about the other person, first. It's about me letting go of what's going on within myself. And sometimes, a lot of time, it's being projected on the other person or another group. Oh, it's the Democrat. They don't love the country. It's the Republican. They're too, they don't love the country. So it's the blaming game going on without doing the actual work of self-transformation.
Oh, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. Actually, you've introduced. There's a lot of natural binaries in your thinking, which it's really valuable now because, as you mentioned, there's so much of what happens socially and in the commentary world that is one-sided, and so that is one-sided, and so by you having this kind of seeming dialogical weave in every thought is very valuable. So not only are we juxtaposing work on the individual to the collective larger work of peace, but also even forgiveness itself, even if we're just looking at only one small part of it, just the individual work of forgiveness is not only forgiving the other, but it's also recognizing one's own role or
Yeah,
part. Is that correct? Is
it,
that
it's definitely correct. Yeah, correct.
wonderful?
Hmm.
Okay, outstanding. Here's at the very outset, in the introduction of your book,
Yeah.
you describe a series of events that happened in your own personal life beginning in
Mhm.
September of 2002.
Yeah,
So you were a young man. You were born and raised in Cote d'Ivoire. Is that correct?
exactly. It's correct.
Okay. And in the city or in the countryside or where what is
Countryside, northern side, majority Islam. The country is the country. Interestingly, majority of people in the north are Muslims, and majority of people in the south are Christian. And I think it came because of colonialism, and also the rise of Islam in the north, and then coming to the south,
yes.
and the colonizers coming, to the south and trying to go beyond, to go to the north, and then they meet somewhere
Yeah.
in the country
Yeah.
culturally.
Yeah. And so you hate to use the word interesting because it sounds too removed.
Yeah,
Because lives are so impacted by these histories that you don't want to just be leaning back in your scholar's rocking chair saying, "Oh, that's so interesting." But it really is, in fact, interesting. It's almost as though Islam, many West African nations have that north-south quality to
exactly.
the religious divide. Am I correct?
It's definitely correct.
Yeah, Nigeria is very famous for that,
Yes.
it seems it's almost as though Islam arrived by land and Christian and colonial forces arrived by sea. It's like that, isn't it?
Oh, that's correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
even that would be a very interesting angle through which to start to look at the realities and that West African nations
Mhm.
have to face this whole by land by sea even, and because one typically looks at the economic and political dimensions of the colonial. Would you agree that the Muslim presence in West Africa is also could be described somewhat as in a colonial fashion? It's non-African, non-indigenous anyway. That's for sure.
It's not at all. I mean, if you look at the idea about spreading Islam, there's one component that is actually very similar to the colonial perspective, which is bringing, I guess, salvation to the world by all means,
Hmm.
and people have to change their way. Africans have their own traditions and culture and religions, and those religions were considered evil, and African have to change their way. Even names were changed. For example, my name Drissa is basically not African; it's Islamic.
Yeah.
And then it's a long history. And the same thing you will see in the south in Ivory Coast. Many people have Christian's name, because that's also one aspect of, you can see similarity. You can see, and because it's very hard to separate, politics and religion in the Islamic theology. So that also play a major role into how things evolve, even within in the country, and many other countries. So I don't. I see a lot of similarities there. Yeah,
Mm-mm-mm.
in the approach and the mindset of both groups.
Yes. Yeah, I've spent a lot of time in West Africa myself, and it isn't only from there, but it's really everywhere in the world that I can't wait for the day when the infinite wisdom and infinite genius of indigenous spirituality is given. It's not a recovery of justice thing. It's just and something the world needs is is that wisdom.
Yeah.
And this isn't pandering, but I can't get enough of indigenous African wisdom. It is such a root of such an incredibly valuable collection
Yeah.
of insights for human life, family life, social life, that the world can't finally fully manage without it. And it's the same for many, many different indigenous traditions, from the northernmost tips all the way into, whether it's India, Africa, Latin
Yeah.
America.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally agree. Totally.
Yeah. But here's a good jumping off point, because you were telling about the nature of your name.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I wanted really to take a little time with, is what led you to know what you know about the nature of peace and reconciliation. It
Mm-hmm.
comes out of an experience that originated with your name, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
Can you? I can read it, and I'm going to post it with the article, so that even though it's in your book, your people should buy your book. But
Yeah.
I'm going to post at least this part of your biography, so
Mm-hmm.
people can read it. But I'm not going to read it here. In 2002, you start to tell a story. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. In 2002, civil war, I mean, started in Ivory Coast, and it was a political. I mean, a group of Northerner rebelled against the government, and the reason for that was
If I
a
may, when you say northern, or did it have a Muslim flavor to the identity of the
yeah,
rebel? Okay, yeah,
even though one major player, Northerner, was Christian,
I see.
but reality is majority of them were Muslim, and so when civil war started, people in the south, and then you have people all over the places in the country anyway. So
Sure.
the only one of the way for people to actually identify you as a rebel or not was your name,
Oh.
because your name will directly link you to where you come from. Okay.
Mm.
Even in the diaspora here, when I say my name, people will identify me with where I exactly come from. That's my identity card. I don't need actually.
If you're pulled over by the police for speeding, just tell them your name.
Yeah. So I am running away from the conflict where a lot of killing is happening, to the south, and I get arrested, and the policeman took my identity card and say, your name is Drissa Kone, you're a rebel. So
Mm.
he doesn't ask me any other thing, and I was arrested and sent in jail and torture. And I've seen people there, people with, everybody have seen that they're from the same region that I came from. And and I see that, and I know deep in my heart that this is wrong, that we cannot just torture somebody, arrest somebody and torture him based on his name, because I was innocent. I didn't do anything wrong.
Mm.
I was even trying to be safe by moving from that zone.
Mm.
But because that the police was so, they could actually see many similar name as rebel in the north, though, so they won't dissociate and
Mm. Mm.
make discernment about who deeply in his heart doesn't want war, or who is actually against them.
Yeah.
So, that's where I was so resentful, so much resentful, to a point that I was thinking, when I leave here, I'm going back to actually become a rebel and fight. That's the point, the level of resentment that I have.
Mm. So here you were a young man raised well, innocently, actually seeking the more the most righteous possible way, leaving the region where the rebellious instigations were arising,
Yeah.
and just by the mere prejudice or bias, or they just say your name is this, and it wasn't merely that you were sent away or sent back or denied some passage or so, but it actually resulted in you being imprisoned and tortured.
Correct. Correct.
This is so extreme,
It,
and and this torture
mhm.
resulted in actually coming on the very kind of edge, to the very brink, like within millimeters of actually producing the very thing that they thought you were
Yeah.
as fine as could be. They themselves create, or came close to
Yeah.
creating, a violent militant rebel, just by the sheer the
By
sheer
the
abuse
way,
of your identity.
exactly. By
Mm.
the way I was treated, it create because this is just make a quick link to what is going on in America today with the police brutality and the way you treat people. It's like you plant a seed in them, and their reaction can be very, very bad because not everybody is able to actually let go when they get mistreated.
Right.
So that's what happened, and I wanted to go fight. I want that was what that was my heart. I was so it was so painful and so unjust, so that
Yeah.
I wanted to do something about it.
And that's the thin edge of the sword, Kone,
Yeah.
professor, because because on the one hand, like, I've often noticed, I've been in many war zones myself over the course of my life, and I've
Mhm.
often noticed that these young boys facing across from one another, rifles drawn, they're
Mhm.
all they are is just young boys. They
Yeah.
they by dint of birth, they're holding a rifle on this side or on that side, but they're nothing but young boys.
Yeah.
It's independent of their. It's by dint of birth, and so here are young men. Now, on the other hand, what happens to the young man who in efforts of 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 justice and fairness this lets the one go, who then goes, kills a school or something. That's the other side of the that's the other side of the burden. Here are you, perfectly good,
Mhm.
being led all the way to torture, the supreme injustice over your life,
Yeah.
and the police stopping you, and possibly believing they're saving the lives of innocents, for all they know. Of course,
Yeah.
torture wasn't necessary, but these are the decisions in the heat of conflict.
Yeah.
So and yet they're exactly what you said about the United States.
Mhm.
Here you have a police officer. He's experienced 1,000 times real violence coming out of a situation,
Yeah.
and who knows how many people he's radicalizing based on the prejudices that grow in
Yeah.
the job. Correct? Is this?
Correct.
Yeah, but
Correct.
um, those are always sensitive to move them up into the present. But it's remarkable. I've known you all my life, and when I was studying your book and I read that you were tortured,
Mhm.
I was truly, I would never have been able to see any trace
Mm.
of an experience so indescribable in your life. It's not there.
Mhm.
So and you brought us here to the point where you're saying, um, you were on the brink of, you ready to go home, get trained, and get your revenge, and rightfully so. And
Yeah.
carry on with your experience, if you would.
So and then something happened, and I call I call it a spiritual experience. And a lot of time people who are in tremendous suffering will have that same experience. I've read in many places. I had an experience with Christ who asked me to forgive. And
So, so you are in prison. You are
yes,
still in prison,
I
and
was in prison.
at some moment, something you actually have an experience with Christ.
I had an experience with Christ.
Okay.
And then to make things clear, I, of course, I was exposed to Christianity, but never intended
Yeah.
ever to become a Christian or never, none of this. And
Right.
and that moment, the least thing that I was thinking of is to become Christian. And so I was shocked. I was under shock. I was crying when I had that experience,
Mm,
and my whole being felt differently after that,
mm,
and I was deeply after the experience, I felt a deep sense of peace within my heart.
mm,
Okay, even though in my mind I was still, you know, thinking about what's going to happen next. Should I go or not? But my heart was different.
mm. It's remarkable.
Yeah.
A couple of things. A lot of times, maybe people would be cynical
Mhm,
about hearing such a tale. Oh, he's being tortured in the South, so he turns to Christ. It's the way out of the situation.
mhm.
A, that's A. That's and so it's so hard to break through people's suspicious minds, and because all you're describing is a genuine experience with Christ.
Yeah.
And also, you mentioned just a second ago, you said, I never had any intention or desire or interest, or I wasn't trying to become a Christian. And
Yeah.
from what I understand, you didn't. You're not, right? These.
Yeah. I'm not Christian. I still feel deeply in my heart that Islam has there is a genuine spirituality in Islam, and that's where I definitely connect with after that. And I deeply think that what Christ actually, my experience was with Christ was a universal principle that people even who are not Christian can experience too.
Exactly right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
there's an interesting story about Nelson Mandela that I recently read. He went to a restaurant to have lunch with his friends, and then when he was having lunch with his friend, there was a white man sitting nearby and was looking at him from time to time. And then Nelson Mandela recognized him and said, "Oh, you know, please come sit with me. Let's have lunch together." And he came, and Nelson Mandela actually ordered food for him, and then said, "Eat whatever you want, and dinner. I mean, dessert and drink." And while he was eating, he was shaking. You know. And then after that, he paid the bill and leave, and then shake the guy's hand and say, "Nice to meet you again," and leave. So later, his friend asked him, "Who's this guy? It looks weird and strange, and he seems sick." And Nelson Mandela said, "No, he's not. He's just afraid because this was one of my persecutors when I was in jail.
Mm,
He will beat me and torture me almost every day.
mm,
And he will, when I was thirsty and I want to drink, I was asking for a cup of water. He will pee on me."
mm,
And
mm,
friends say, how in the world can you be kind to a horrible person like that? How is that possible? And Nelson Mandela response was, no one is born hating another person because of the color of their skin. That's one of his famous quotes.
Yes.
Of his background or his religion. People learn to hate, so they have to learn to love. And the only way you teach people to love, you love them.
Mm.
You know.
Yeah, it's fantastic. That's so profound.
Yeah.
That's so profound.
Yeah.
And that is kind of in many ways the golden thread that runs throughout all the pages of your careful study in this book we're discussing. Am I right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
And just quickly before moving on, it's interesting to me your description of the experience of Christ. It has all the coming back to the elements or qualities or dimensions of this Christ experience of yours, and I'm very glad we've been able to touch on its subtleties a bit, because if you were ever in Christian circumstances, which you might be, and there's a certain classic narrative of testimonies. I was this. Christ came into my life, and this.
Yeah.
And what you describe is exactly the testimony of Christians. And so I'm very happy to hear this kind of universal, kind of non-sectarian, non-institutional affiliation type punchline to your as the story, because you said that once that encounter with Christ happened in your life, you said you were still naturally, like any normal person, working on what comes next. Do I get out of here? You're in the middle of a horror, and you're trying to get. But you said everything from that point on was under the state of peace, in a state of peace.
Yeah.
And how is that, or what was the nature of that? Can you recall, or
it's it's hard to describe it with a logical word, but my heart was different. I didn't feel that sense of wanting to actually go and kill another person for what was happening to me. Even though in my mind, I know it was wrong. My mind was, but because I was so resentful, I think God gave me an opportunity to let go because I was very resentful.
So the peace came. It's almost like removing a splinter or removing a cancer or something.
Yeah.
The peace came because you were cleansed of something that was making you sick. You felt, it's almost like you felt healthy in a way. Yeah. And so this becomes the beginning of what you come to understand to be a highly recommended pathway to address the nature of conflict at any level in human affairs. Yes. Okay. And that's what your book is about.
That's what my book is about.
Yeah. Okay. So here's another part. It's still within the introduction. Forgiving those who hurt us is a common experience on all levels, from the individual to the group to the culture and beyond. It is a journey to peace through personal transformation.
Yeah.
I realize now that I will definitely rather have two parts to this interview and cover some of the other dimensions of your writing in the second part.
Yeah.
Because here I want to hit on a fairly big topic here, and maybe we can allow that to be the alpha and omega of this particular part one.
Yeah.
All right.
Sure.
In what I've just read, it says, forgiving those who hurt us is a common experience on all levels, et cetera, et cetera. I just read it. It is the journey to peace through personal transformation. And here's another arena where you might find major cynicism.
Mhm.
that those who are activists, those who are on the streets, those who might even believe in violent confrontation with authorities, they call. I think they mock the concept, something like, "Oh, let's all get together and sing Kumbaya," kind of, right? Right? Do you
Okay.
understand? Right? And so we don't have to just deal with a dismissive mentality, but a genuine, even hard thinking
Mhm.
is moving from, because there are individuals who make it, right? We make it, right?
Yeah.
There, but and yet the cynic or the doubter or the sincere doubter will say, but where do we see that the difference has been made? Where do we see? Look at South Africa today. I can't speak knowledgeably to it, but something like that. You have Mandela doing the opposite, the greatest man in South African history,
Yeah.
doing a Christ-like deed.
Mhm.
How do we get from here to there? Let me turn it over to you on this one.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay, sure. This is a very good point because, of course, you're right when you talk about forgive. It's considered, I think it's considered weakness basically in our society. It's considered to be something that people feel like you were such a weak person. How will you just forgive? You just have to take revenge, and that's what justice means to many people.
yes.
um, but reality is, it's not actually, it's a common thing to see that every time people get hurt, the reaction to that pain is actually pain going on, right? So the reaction
Right.
to pain is to fight back. So we have the impression that when we fight that person back, so he's gonna heal the pain. Or people who can fight will just withdraw from the relationship. People sometimes stop talking to each other. It's simple.
Yeah.
And there is no more communication going on, no possibility for dialogue. That's also a manifestation of hurt, of pain.
Yes.
But a lot of time people forget that there's another alternative, maybe a third alternative, which is to heal. Because
Mm,
by fighting you don't heal by the whole paradigm of flight or fight paradigm, right?
yeah.
You don't heal from that.
Mm,
You heal by actually transforming your pain into a sacred gift to heal others.
okay.
And people like that, we call them, in the African tradition, we call them elders.
Mm,
And we need more elders in our society, because these are things that you manifest into your way of being.
yeah.
And then it attracts people, because it challenged the whole concept of flight and fight paradigm.
Yes.
It goes beyond that, and that's what we need. And that's why Martin Luther King Jr. was hated by extremists on both sides,
Right.
because people like that, they don't then it's not a path that is admired, but that's the truth.
Yeah.
That's the only way we can actually go to a higher ground together,
Hmm. Right.
because we take the others, we fight, we're going to repeat the same cycle of violence, because whenever I had a chance, I would get back on you,
Yes.
and it will destroy everything, and then we can even give to the next generation, and the collective pain will keep going on and on and on.
Mm,
So
mm,
it has to stop somewhere.
yes. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. What really set off a spark of light in my listening as you were speaking just now is the secret of embodiment and the identity of the mission of elders.
Yeah.
So that you're not posing or positing a theory of peace and reconciliation. What you are saying is that there needs to be individuals who have attained the capacity to convert pain to what? What was it,
To a,
Kone?
to a sacred gift to heal others.
To convert pain
Yes.
into a sacred gift to heal others.
Yes.
The embodiment of that is that bridge across from personal transformation to the larger units of family, society, and nation culture. Okay, this is fantastic. I've greatly enjoyed just the very beginning of our conversation. And thank you for being with us today. I look forward to continuing in our second interview.
Sure, it was a pleasure, and looking forward to talk about it. I think it's needed more than ever. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Professor.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
You.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye-bye.